Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Wallace. How are you? I just wanted to do this quick video. It is a finishing up of the review that we started in class yesterday. So this is Unit 2, one of the important units that's really about supply and demand, elasticity, government involvement in market failures, and things like that. So we didn't get a chance to really finish some of the review yesterday, so just doing a little bit of it on this video in case you're somebody that wants to check it out. One of the things that we know we're going to be addressing is price controls, floors and ceilings. This is when the government comes in and sets a price. It is different because now, in a in a classical market example, whenever you have a price that's high or a price that's low, we see a self-correction toward the equilibrium. In this case, we don't see that because the government's coming in and setting a price. We can also look at quotas and tariffs. We started to address that in class yesterday. Subsidies, excise taxes, and a little bit with elasticity. So I'll kind of go through some of the things that we looked at already a little bit quickly. Remember that price controls exist for the purpose of generally benefiting one side of the market. You could have a price floor. Price floors are placed above the equilibrium. So you might have something like this $60 line right here. That would be a price control of $60. Minimum wage, for example, is a price floor. In this case, in the product market, you might have a price floor so that there is a little bit higher of a price for a good that is just seeing a very low equilibrium price, like an agricultural product or even like milk or something like that. So price floors are generally elevating the price and mandating that the price has to be $60. It can't be lower. It could be higher, but it can't be lower. There's a lot of consequences of a price control. One is as soon as you move away from the equilibrium, price and quantity, you will now have a quantity supplied. In this case, with the price floor, quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded by 100. So you have a surplus of 100. In the opposite case, if we had the $20 price ceiling, now we know that we have a quantity demanded that's greater than a quantity supplied. And so there's a shortage. So surplus up here, too much quantity supplied, shortage down here, too much quantity demanded. In both of these cases, you're going to see the quantity be 100 that gets transacted in the market. In the case of the price floor, you only had 100 units of the good that were demanded. So regardless that there's all this supply, it doesn't really matter. Only the demand is actually, the quantity demanded is actually purchased. So 100 would be the units, that are bought in this market. Likewise, when the price is very, very low, so this would be to help out consumers who might not be able to afford a good, we set the price, really, really low. Now more people can access that. There's a whole bunch of demand curve that wasn't accessible before because the price was $40. Now it's a little bit lower, so you have a lot more quantity demanded. But at the same time, you're going to see a quantity in the market that's 100 because suppliers are only willing to offer 100 units at $20, even though consumers are demanding a quantity of 200. Okay, so we end up with 100, which is not allocatively efficient. In this market, allocative efficiency or socially optimal quantity, they are essentially the same thing. That would be 150. Okay, so when the market was in equilibrium, it was producing transactions of 150 units, and we don't have that here. Okay, so we have less than that. So this is a market failure, and we know it's a market failure because there's deadweight loss, right? That gap, in a sense, between the 100 and the 150 units. Those 50 additional units are never transacted in the market. Okay, so that's something to note. So at 20, there would be a surplus of 0 because there is no such thing as a surplus. Down here, it's a shortage. What would be the effect of a price floor? It would be a surplus of 100. Okay, so those would be that. Let's look at some of the next things so we can kind of, check out some of the next things. I think we started to look at tariffs and quotas. And just for a definition, a quota is a limit on the number of exports. A quota is like an actual number on the quantity of a good that can be imported. And a tariff is a per unit tax on imports. Tariffs have the advantage of raising revenue. Quotas do not. And so that's one key difference. For our purposes, we're generally looking on the AP micro exam at the tariff graph. The purpose of having a tariff, right, would be to protect domestic producers from a cheaper world price. So once you have a great deal of trade, a lot of you noted, okay, Tesla is kind of, maybe seeing itself overpriced in what is becoming a very competitive market. And maybe other electric vehicles are going to be a little bit more, kind of the incentive is there to purchase those cheaper electric vehicles. And so maybe at some point there might be a need to have protectionism to protect like American vehicles, right? It's probably not the case in that example, but let's say that sort of thing was happening. What would this look like? We looked at this in class, and so we can draw a little bit here, right on here. So, first thing is to look at just your domestic supply curve and your domestic demand curve, right? This is basically suggesting if there was nothing else happening in this market, the quantity would be Q3 and the price would be P1. Those would be allocatively efficient, and that would be, kind of where the equilibrium is. The issue comes about when there's foreign trade and there's competition from foreign firms. Now we have the world price, which is kind of like a price control. This world price now is creating an additional, kind of competition. Prior to the world price, our producer surplus was I, L, and T. Okay, this area right here, I, L, and T. And with the world price, we have just T, okay? Because the price is here, the supply curve is here. We're looking at producers, not really, domestic producers not benefiting that much. This graph does not show us foreign producers and the degree to which they're benefiting, okay? We also know that when the market was in equilibrium, consumer surplus was just H. That was it, right? That was consumer surplus. ILT was producer surplus. Once we have the world price, we can kind of see consumer surplus with the world price is going to be massive, right? Consumers benefit a lot from trade, right? From having foreign competition. All of this would be our consumer surplus, okay, with the world price. And this is assuming no tariff yet, okay? So the way to answer this question, if you were looking for consumer surplus with the world price, HI, JK, LM, NRS, okay, all of that would be consumer surplus. T would be producer surplus, okay? Once we decide to have a tariff, this is now the government coming along. The government knows that there will be revenue from this, but generally, the purpose of this is so that the domestic producer is not feeling that they can't carry a great deal of the market, and also that they can have a greater part of the market at a higher price. When the world price exists, the domestic producers are producing the quantity between 0 and Q1. Okay, that's all they're doing. That's all they're incentivized to do based on the data of the supply curve. In order to produce more quantity like Q2, they would need a higher price, and that's the purpose of the tariff. Before the tariff, there's a lot of goods that are getting imported, right? So if you kind of follow this yellow line that I'm drawing, between Q1 and Q5, really between the quantity that's supplied domestically and the quantity that is demanded by, say, Americans in the population, there is a whole shortage of goods. In this case, there is not a line outside a store waiting to get in. The shortage is fulfilled by goods that are coming from overseas, from trade, okay? So the world price, very good for consumers, great because consumers are getting their quantity demanded of Q5 under the world price. The transacted quantity domestically is Q1, but including trade, it's Q5. So consumers are very happy about this, and that's why there's so much consumer surplus. Once you add the tariff on, okay, what happens when you add the tariff on? Now, in this case, you're saying that the world price is going to be more for all those foreign firms, and it gives the domestic companies the invitation to increase their price. And if you look at kind of this new price, right, let's go with a blue line here. All of a sudden we have a tariff, okay, and there's a per unit tariff. So, for every unit that you produce, maybe it's $2 or whatever it is, right? So world price is just increasing by a certain amount. Here's our $2 tariff, coming along. It just elevates the world price at every single quantity. Once you have something like this, now our producer surplus is a little bit bigger because the price went up. Whenever the price goes up, that's going to be good for producers. Our consumer surplus is lower. It's still greater than it was with with no trade at all. We're better off with trade and a tariff in terms of consumer surplus. We have HIJK, but certainly it's not as good as not having a tariff. So the tariff, has some harms for consumers, but some goods for the producers. If we wanted to see kind of on net balance, how good this tariff is, we also have the tariff revenue. So the government is going to collect money from firms that are foreign firms that are going to be sending goods to the U.S. N&R will be the tariff revenue. How do we know that? Well, once PT comes about and you have the price of the tariff, this is like a price control. So our quantity supplied is Q2. So the producers at home are producing 0 to Q2. The quantity demanded is a little smaller than before. It's Q4. So there's a shortage of goods between Q4 and Q2. That's what will be imported by foreign firms, and the government will tax that. Okay, so the per unit tax exists between the world price and the tariff, and the quantity that gets taxed, every unit that gets taxed, is the difference between Q4 minus Q2. Okay, M and S. Okay, if we look at M and S and we kind of put them in a different color, these right here are our deadweight loss. They are not part of producer surplus. M is not part of producer surplus. S is no longer part of consumer surplus once you have the tariff, and it's not part of the government revenue. Okay, so it is inefficiency. It is deadweight loss. Okay, it is negative welfare that did exist when you only had the world price. All of this was consumer surplus. Okay, so now some of that welfare has been lost. Okay, inefficient. So that's, one way to look at the tariff graph. Okay, let's go on to the next one, which is probably the hardest one. Oh, here's some good questions for us. And I think we answered some of these. So we'll go on to the next one. Subsidies. We address this a little bit when we talk about externalities. You can talk about subsidies when you're talking about externalities. It's a way to correct an externality. Subsidies that are to correct externalities do not create deadweight loss. They actually get rid of deadweight loss. They enable us to produce a quantity when the externality is under allocating a resource and we want more of it, okay, usually for a positive externality. You can also have, however, a subsidy just without an externality. And in that case, there will be some deadweight loss, just like a tax without a tax on an externality. Just a regular old tax can create some deadweight loss, okay? So a subsidy that is just a straightforward subsidy, by definition, is when the government is giving firms or producers money, okay? A per unit subsidy is when a firm is getting money for every single quantity that they're producing. That would actually shift your supply curve if it's the producer that's getting the subsidy. The goal would be to make more of the goods because generally you subsidize